Alrighty, so all of us have different places to store ideas and projects. I personally love Notion. I use it to organize all of my projects as well as sourcing all of my ideas for the things I create. Of course, you can do this in almost any other application, but this is just what I personally prefer. One thing I wanted to draw attention to, especially from the idea generation standpoint, is I think it's really important to have one place that you can easily access as your regular places for inspiration. I have a couple places here. I probably could add more that isn't already on this. But I think it's really important to have like a clear place you can kind of mine for nuggets of ideas, or what I call coal mines. And so going into this other database, this is where I house all my video ideas. Essentially, whenever the thought strikes me, whether I'm in the shower, on a walk, things like that, I make sure to write the idea here into this database so I can organize this at a later point. And one of the things I love about Notion is the ability to create templates. Templates allow me to create a predetermined checklist of things, so I don't have to recreate this multiple times. And this is kind of what you're seeing here as a production checklist of everything that goes into creating these videos. This is a little more geared to more YouTube content, but I think this still applies to these mini videos as well. And I just want to use this to organize and make sure I have all my ducks in a row. Going through here, this is the kind of the hook, or sorry, not the hook, the meat and potatoes of my script. I personally love to just kind of write an outline and then kind of start adding things onto there. I know some people are more intuitive and can do things in one take. I personally don't or are not able to always kind of nail everything in one take and tend to forget things. But don't worry, you can always cut those things out, edit them, and it will look and flow pretty well. So my style is kind of a mixture of an outline as well as part script. I could probably go in and script this out a little bit better. But yeah, I just want to organize my videos into something that is coherent for me. And you can see here that I also just include kind of the shots that I'm thinking about as I'm doing this as well. Okay, so I'm going to take you behind the scenes of my setup, and before I do that, I just wanted to make it very, very clear, you definitely do not need a multi-$1,000 setup to make a good film or to get started on video. And I think that oftentimes people get tripped up in needing all this gear when it's actually not that relevant. Yes, I mean, having a good setup, a good production value does add to making it look more legit. But I think that especially starting out, it actually can sometimes hamper your ability to tell a good story. When you don't know the equipment and how it works, it becomes a little more frustrating to start to use, and it becomes a higher learning curve when all you really need is just your smartphone and maybe a tripod and a cheap microphone. Get started and to start talking on front of camera, because you want to make sure you get your fundamentals down correct. All right, so I'm gonna switch my camera and let's go over to that now. All right, y'all, so this is my little filming setup. It's a little bit simple, but it does get the job done. One thing that I will kind of make notice is that I have all of my blinds closed, and that is mostly just because with filming, you really want to make sure that you're filming in a consistent lighting scenario. When you have lots of ambient light, clouds come over, clouds pass by and throw shadows onto your face. So just a quick tip, you want to just make sure that when you do film, you film in a place with consistent light. But with that said, if you don't have a light, you definitely getting next to a window or filming right next to a window where your face is facing the window, so you get that nice window light, is a great alternative if you don't have any external lighting sources. But let's dive into just kind of what I peek behind what I have here. So I have a mini tiny little light here. It's called an Aputure F7, I believe. I can add the link in the description. It's just on a ball head mount with a light stand, and I have it running through actually a reflector. I have like a 5-in-1 reflector dish that I use for a lot of photography stuff, and it has inside of it is a little diffusion panel. So I use my reflector as a lining of diffusion to make my light source a little bit more softer. And it is on this little C-clamp mount thing and precariously wedged next to a light to prop it up at like a 45-degree angle, just because I think that angle does make the lighting a little bit nicer. And over here, I have my camera. I have a Sony a7 III, and attached to it is a 24mm lens. I usually keep the aperture probably somewhere around 1.8 as an f-stop. For those that don't have too much photography knowledge, the way you get kind of those nice creamy backgrounds is having these lower f-stop numbers. If you guys are interested, I can maybe put together a quick photography tutorial for you guys at a later date. But especially with the lens choice, I opted for something much wider, especially for like talking head portion videos. It's really more useful to have a wider focal length, so something smaller, anywhere in the maybe 20mm to 35mm range. And that way it just gets a little bit more of you in picture, especially when you don't have a lot of space and you don't really want to have just a head. And something you would get with a much tighter focal length. And that is, oh, I actually did forget. I have this little tiny reflector dish. Maybe you can see it. It's how I frame my shots. So it's just a mirror that I attach on top of my camera so I can actually see myself. And maybe this little, yeah, there we go. You can see myself filming as we go through this. And the other pieces I have this tiny little aperture light. I sometimes will use this as like a background light or a hair light that is useful. And then of course I have a little, let me see, I don't think I can flip myself around, but I have this little Rode, or not Rode, it's a wired lav mic, and I just kind of have that lapelled to my chest. But yeah, that's my setup. Let's dive back in and let's talk a little bit more about recording. As far as editing goes, there are tons and tons of great comprehensive tutorials to teach you the ins and outs of tools like Final Cut Pro, and I'll link a couple in the description below. One of them is my mentor Ali Abdaal, who is a very successful YouTuber, and he has a really great comprehensive Final Cut course that I've used and incorporated into a lot of my videos, and takes maybe about 2 or so-ish hours. And another thing that I will link as well is my buddy Joe's YouTube video, and it describes in detail how he goes about and creates these social templates for your videos, and how he exports those to things like Twitter and Instagram, and is exactly the process I use to make my videos and put them in that nice tiny little square format that you see on Twitter. But if you want the SparkNotes version of how I edit these things and to actually have a short example, let's dive into Final Cut Pro, and I'll show you an example of how I would go from Final Cut Pro and export that into Twitter. So let's dive in. All right, guys, so just want to quickly show you how I would take a video from Final Cut Pro and upload that to something like Twitter in a brief overview. My buddy Joe goes over everything that I'm about to show you in much more detail, so highly recommend checking out his video. But essentially, the one thing that I want to stress is making it in a vertical format like this, which is 1080 by 1920, which is something you would see for something like Instagram. And then once you have this format, it's pretty easy to repurpose it and chop it up into different formats, like a square, which you might see for Twitter or LinkedIn. And I love this because really we're in the name of the game of how can we repurpose content so we can work smarter, not harder, and reuse the content we have so we're not always having to generate new things. And once I'm done in Final Cut, I would export this and upload it to a captioning tool. And the tool that I use is called Subly. And what I love about them is they will not only subtitle the videos for you, but you can actually format the subtitles to look the way that you want for your brand. and you can actually then use our tool to resize the videos for you for different aspect ratios. So in this video, for example, you have the subtitles here, and it kind of looks like a doc, which is great. You can kind of hit enter and then, or maybe not in this case, but you can kind of add to the subtitles at these different timestamps, which is super nice. And you can also change the position of how you want these titles to look. And as mentioned before, you can change the font styles and kind of make it look the specific way and style that you want them to do. And once you're done, setting up the captions and the way that you want them to be, you can go ahead and just resize them into different formats, which is super useful because you only have to upload to Subbly once in one way, and then you can kind of resize this appropriately for different formats on different platforms. And the other cool thing I really like about them is once you download the video, you can also download it with either an SRT caption title, or you can also even add a .txt file, which is super great because if you're doing something like maybe an interview or like a podcast episode, for example, you can throw this up on the Subbly, it'll caption it for you, and then you can download the text file and use the text file as a way to chop up the really good bits that you really want to share, and then upload that to either a blog or post it on social and things like that. So super useful. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. Hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to DM me on Twitter or on Circle. More than happy to help you with either gear questions or setting things up. And I hope that by the end of this, it maybe convinced you to maybe start trying video. All it takes is having your camera or your phone camera and just pressing that record button. So let me know if you have any questions, and looking forward to seeing your video essays. Take care, y'all. Peace.